blues fans, you found us and we're so glad you did. Time for another episode of This Week of the Blues. I'm your host, Jimbo Big Train Matson, with the blues band Big Train and the Locomotives. We're your favorite blues nerds. We have a great episode this week, so let's take a look and see what happened this week in blues history. Texas blues guitarist and singer James Thunderbird Davis was born November 10th in 1938. He recorded several singles for Duke Records in the early 1960s. He dropped out of public attention until his career was revived in 1989 with the release of his album Checkout Time. On January 24th in 1992, only 2 months before he was to record his second album, Davis collapsed and died of a heart attack on stage halfway through a set at the Blues Saloon in St. Paul, Minnesota. He was only 53 years old. Chicago blues guitarist Hip Linkchain was born November 10th in 1936. His best-known numbers were Change My Blues and That Will Never Do. He was born in Jackson, Mississippi as Willie Richard and raised in Louise, Mississippi. He picked cotton and then relocated to Chicago in 1954. His talents as a composer definitely put him far above the average bluesman. Linkchain worked with Lester Davenport, Pine Top Perkins, Tyrone Davis, and Little Walter. Blues musician and singer Bobby Rush was born November 10th, 1933 in Homer, Louisiana. As a young child, he began experimenting with music using a sugarcane syrup bucket and a broom wire diddly bow. Rush has won 12 Blues Music Awards, and in 2017, at the age of 83, he won his first Grammy Award for the album Porcupine Meat. He is inducted into the Blues Hall of Fame, the Mississippi Musicians Hall of Fame, and the Rhythm and Blues Music Hall of Fame. Blues harmonica player George Mojo Buford was born November 10th, 1929 in Hernando, Mississippi. He relocated to Chicago in 1952, forming the Savage Boys, which eventually was known as the Muddy Waters Junior Band. Buford first played in Muddy Waters' backing band from 1959 to 1962, in 1967, in the early 1970s, and then returned for the final time after Jerry Portnoy departed to form the legendary blues band. R&B singer Lavern Baker was born November 11th, 1929 in Chicago and raised in Calumet City, Illinois. Baker began singing in Chicago clubs such as Club de Lisa around 1946, often billed as Little Miss Sharecropper. She had several hit records on the pop charts in the 1950s and early 1960s. In 1991, she became the second female solo artist inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, only following Aretha Franklin in 1987. Delta blues legend Bukka White was born November 12, 1906 in Houston, Mississippi. He was a first cousin of B.B. King's mother. At the age of 14, he went with an uncle to Clarksville, Mississippi, using his guitar playing as a way to attract women. He wasn't the first and far from the last teenager who took up the guitar for that very reason. In Clarksville, White came into contact with Delta blues legend Charlie Patton. In addition to music, White pursued careers in sport, playing in Negro League baseball and taking up boxing. New Orleans blues singer Blue Lou Barker was born November 13th in 1913. She often sang and performed with her husband, guitarist Danny Barker, who was a regular of the New Orleans music scene. Blue Lou Barker's recording of A Little Bird Told Me was released by Capitol Records and reached the Billboard chart on December 18, 1948, and lasted 14 weeks on the chart, peaking at number 4. Barker was inducted into the Louisiana Blues Hall of Fame in 1997, 1 year before she died in New Orleans at the age of 84. Guitarist Bobby Manuel was born November 13th 1945. He was hired by Stax Records in the late 60s as an engineer, and also quickly began doing studio work as a guitarist, becoming one of the company's most dependable and often used session players. Manuel's credits include playing with some of the blues and soul's most iconic figures, including Albert King, Rufus Thomas, Luther Ingram, and Isaac Hayes. Blues guitarist John Hammond was born November 13th in 1942. Hammond usually plays acoustically, choosing National Resophonic guitars. In 1963, he became one of the first white artists to record a blues album. He is also the only person who had both Eric Clapton and Jimi Hendrix in his band at the same time. Yes, you heard me right. Although it wasn't for a very long time. It lasted 5 days in 1966 when Hammond played the Gaslight Cafe in New York City. To his regret and to ours, they never recorded together. Well, here's an alliteration for you. The very versatile vocalist Valerie Wellington was born November 14th in 1959. Yeah, say that sentence 3 times fast. Anyway, she was a singer who, in her short career, switched from singing opera to singing Chicago blues. On her 1984 album, $1 Million Secret, she worked with Sunnyland Slim, Billy Branch, and Magic Slim. She was trained as an opera singer and graduated from the American Conservatory of Music. But in 1982, she took up singing the blues in Chicago clubs. Blues guitarist Anson Funderburgh was born November 14, 1954, in Plano, Texas. He started Anson Funderburgh and the Rockets in 1977. That incorporates both Chicago blues and Texas blues. Their first album release was in 1981, and they continued to tour and perform at blues festivals. In 1985, Funderburgh invited the blues harmonica player Sam Myers from Jackson, Mississippi to join. He stayed with the band until his death in 2006, appearing on 8 albums with them. Chicago blues harp player Carey Bell was born November 14th in 1936. While most often known for his harmonica playing in the Chicago area, he also played bass. Bell played harmonica and bass guitar for other blues musicians in the late 50s into the early 1970s, before taking off on his own solo career. Besides his own albums, he recorded as an accompanist or duo artist with Earl Hooker, Robert Nighthawk, Lowell Fulson, Eddie Taylor, Louisiana Red, and Jimmy Dawkins. And he was a frequent partner with his son, the guitarist Lurie Bell. Chicago blues guitar legend Hubert Sumlin was born November 16th in 1931. Sumlin was born in Greenwood, Mississippi, and raised in Hughes, Arkansas. He got his first guitar when he was about 8 years old. As a longtime member of Howlin' Wolf's band, Sumlin has created some of the most iconic blues riffs we know today. Hubert Sumlin was inducted into the Blues Foundation Hall of Fame in 2008, was nominated for 4 Grammys, and won multiple Blues Music Awards. He was ranked number 43 in Rolling Stone's 100 Greatest Guitarists of All Time. The father of the blues, none other than William Christopher Handy, was born November 16th in 1873. W.C. Handy was one of the most influential songwriters in the United States. In 1903, while waiting for a train in Tutwiler in the Mississippi Delta, Handy overheard a black man playing a steel guitar using a knife as a slide. Handy was the first to publish music in the blues form, taking Delta blues from a regional music style with a limited audience to a new level of popularity. The godfather of Austin blues, W.C. Clark, was born November 16th in 1939. Clark was born and raised in Austin, Texas, where he sang gospel music in the choir as a young boy. In the early 1950s, at the age of 14, he learned the guitar and then later experimented with blues and jazz on the bass guitar. In the late 1970s, Clark played in an Austin blues quintet named Triple Threat Review with Lou Ann Barton and Stevie Ray Vaughan. Well, blues fans, we just covered some of the highlights here. Now, if you want to know more about these artists or the many other things that happened this week in the blues, be sure to follow our social media pages or just go visit our website at bigtrainblues.com. We'll have a new episode next week, so we'll see you then.